I'd like to call Ambassador Massari here, because we have a little surprise for you. Recognizing with our award, if I can read, of GEI, Gruppo Esponenti Italiani, the board, on the occasion of the conclusion of the 50th anniversary, of its 50th anniversary celebration, the board of GEI recognized Ambassador Maurizio Massari, permanent representative of Italy to the United States, with the Transatlantic Leadership Award for his distinguished diplomatic service, his steadfast commitment to multilateral dialogue and cooperation, and the vital role he has played in representing Italy with integrity and vision on the global stage. Marking the 80th anniversary of the United Nations and the 70th anniversary of Italy's membership in the United Nations, his leadership has exemplified and reinforced our country, long-standing and as a trusted and respected voice in international affairs. Maurizio.
So let's move to the Security Council reform. I'd like to remember a predecessor of Maurizio Massari, Ambassador Paolo Fulci, that single-handedly resisted a reform about 30 years ago. For those that are not completely familiar with the process of the reform, you know, there is not an African country that is represented permanently in the Security Council. The Security Council has 5 permanent representatives with the right of veto, and it was pretty much built on the ashes of Second World War. So 8 years later, this doesn't stand anymore. Countries like India, like South Africa, want to have a voice. But then countries like Italy resist and say, you know, we shouldn't have France and the UK, you know, why don't we have a European seat? And so we are all represented. So I'd like to give the floor to you, Ambassador Harish, because I know that you think differently from my friend Maurizio Massari, and you are competing on that, but let's hear what is your vision of the new Security Council.
Thank you. I think we just heard if there is one aspect which really riles the majority of members of member nations in the United Nations, it is the fact that the whole matter of Security Council reform has been pending for so long with no serious attempt to address it. Let us be very clear. The matter of Africa or underrepresentation of other developing countries in the Security Council is not in terms of their membership in the non-permanent category. We just heard from Ambassador Carolyn, there are 3 African members. So they are adequately represented in the current Security Council, but in the non-permanent category. So when we speak of historic injustice to Africa, we are speaking of historic injustice to Africa in terms of its representation in the permanent category. Yes, I'm aware that Italy and other countries do have reservations. Of course, they look at it from their own national perspective. The larger context is simply this. Today you have a principal organ of the United Nations reflecting the reality of 1945 and not the reality of 2025. We can continue another 30 years or 40 years, 50 years or 80 years with the same structure. Would it be more representative of that period? The answer is no. Is there a cost for not changing? Of course there is. Is it impossible? No. The Security Council has reformed and has amended the charter. The charter has been amended in the 60s. So basically, I think if we are to go in the current pathway where you will have endless meetings for another 15, 20, 25 years, with no text-based negotiations, with no time deadlines, and everyone happy to kick the can down the road. A time will come when there is no road, and the UN will be completely not fit for purpose. I think that place is very much now. And we can pretend that it doesn't matter, but eventually it does, because the UN is being tarred by the inability of the desired political outcomes on peace and security. The excellent work done by the humanitarian agencies, the excellent work done by the development agencies of the United Nations don't register in public perception, and they assess UN performance by how the Security Council is performing on peace and security.
Thank you. Maurizio, what is Italy's position on the Security Council reform?
Italy's position is well known, but try to explain where we come from with our opposition to expansion to new permanent members. We believe that there is a need to balance the need for have a Security Council more representative of the reality of the 21st century, and then to make room for India, Africa, and other emerging powers. On the other hand, this should not be to the detriment of the effectiveness and the decision-making capacity of the Security Council. Now, the reason why today, and not only today, but for many years, the Security Council has been paralyzed, it doesn't decide, is not because India or Africa or other emerging economies, countries are not in the Council, but because we have the P5 with the veto power. And so you can expand as much as you want, but you are stuck basically with the real problem, the existence of veto power over the P5. So whenever you have a crisis that impacts directly on the interest of one of the P5, then you have the paralysis. Ukraine, you have the veto of Russia, Gaza, you have the veto of the United States, and so on and so forth. Imagine now if we had this crisis in India-Pakistan. If India had been a permanent member of the Security Council and to have some decisions of the Security Council, I think would have been impossible, because I think India would have used legitimately. So I mean, it's veto. So this is the one of the point that we make: how to find the right balance between effectiveness and representativeness. The second point I also like to make is that when we talk about expansion, we're not of the Security Council today. We're not only talking about expansion of to India, to Africa, Brazil, and others, but also we are talking about expansion to some Western countries. And let's be frank, the West is already even more than overrepresented in the Security Council. Among the P5, we have 3 countries which are G7 countries. If you were to expand it to the G4, you would include also Japan and Germany. So you would have 5 countries of the G7 as a permanent members of the Security Council, which is an anomaly, let me say so. And the final point: how do you create new permanent members? On the basis of what criteria the response that India, the G4, I mean, countries that have the ambition to become permanent members say, okay, we are elected by the General Assembly and we become permanent members. But again, elections, one-off for life tenure is the negation of democracy. Democracy means, regular elections. They need to be. You have to be confirmed with the vote of the voters. Every certain number of years. And one election for life, I don't think is really a model of democracy. If you want to make the Security Council more democratic. So these are the objections I try to explain why we are against the expansion to new permanent members. But certainly we totally acknowledge the growing power and influence of India in world affairs, and also the need to correct the historical injustice for Africa, and how to achieve that. Honestly, a perfect solution, I don't know, it's difficult to find.
Thank you. Ambassador Rodrigues-Birkett, well, you're very close to Africa, so what is your position on the reform of the Security Council? You think that The African Union should be represented with a permanent seat, or South Africa, or Egypt. There has been controversy, and you know there are many differences. You know, North Africa is Muslim, and so on and so forth. So, what is your position, considering you deal a lot with Africa and with the African Union?
Well, the position is that the historical injustice must be corrected, and we can, and that means Africa on the Security Council as a permanent member. Because what then would be correcting the historical injustice if you just add more numbers? I think that would actually be perpetuating what we have right now. But let me say this, that I think that if you look at the world right now and the decentralization of decisions on conflicts right now, where decisions are taken somewhere else and not on the council, I think that in itself is telling us that the Security Council is becoming irrelevant. And I think if the Security Council becomes irrelevant, then those who have the most power on the Security Council will lose their relevance. And that itself might be a motivation for reform of the Security Council. And if we look at the last 2 years or so, we have seen some of the permanent members on the council actually coming out to say what is their position on reform. Before, we were not hearing that. And so you would hear one member saying we need to have more developing countries represented. We heard one member said we would support Africa being there and Latin America. And so you're hearing some of this coming from the permanent members. But I think the one thing that I think we should be frustrated with and do something about is the normalization of the exception that we do right now. There is no other process in the United Nations where we don't start negotiations with a text. None. This is the only one. And we have normalized that exception, I would say, for the last generation. The first time a working group was set up was in 1993. Those people, one generation has passed. And in 2007, when we started the IGN process, those people born that year are voting now. And we have not moved with reform. And all of the issues that we're talking about, and Ambassador Massari outlined his position, and Ambassador Harish. But if we don't sit down in a room with all these positions, there might be a halfway point. It might be, if we have more vetoes, then why don't we have a higher threshold for when a veto becomes a veto? For example, if we expand the council to 21 members, maybe you have to get 19 members to support you, for it to vote no, for it to be a veto. So there are many things that we can consider, but unless we have a text, we will not be able to do that. What we do right now is we say our positions all the time without a text, and that is what I think we need to change. And finally, let me say this, and I like the provocative aspect that you raised, and the discomfort by some members with whether it's the WHO, UNRWA, and others. Let me tell you this, we have discomfort as well, that certain organizations are only led by certain nationalities. And so I think we have to look at this across the board. But many of our countries, we go with that once the organization is being, in our view, managed properly. But why is it that one organization is led by only a national of only one country for all the years? And this is what we see all the time. So I think that there are criticisms to go around for everyone. What we need to do is to make the UN fit for purpose at a time when security is now about private armies, is about terrorism, all these new drivers of conflicts that we have to deal with. That is what I think we need to focus on.
Thank you, Guy. Time is running out, so we are at the end. We heard three different positions, encouraging position with vision. You will deal also with the reform of the Security Council. Will you encourage it? And what is your vision for that?
Well, I don't know what the answer to reform the Security Council is, and if I did, you would not expect me as a member of the Secretariat to say anything about it. All I could do actually was point to the fact that in September, the Back to the Future, which was adopted by our summit, did set out a number of considerations. It was considered to be an important step. I hope that it can be built upon. I don't think that the UN 80 initiative is necessarily going to focus upon Security Council reform. I think we're probably looking at other ways in which we can improve the functioning of the organisation, none of which is to underestimate or cast aside the importance of the issue, because as has been stated earlier on, whatever other criticisms of the UN are out there, and I acknowledge they are out there, probably the one thing that people see above all else, what is most visible, is the Security Council, and what is most criticised is the incapacity of the Security Council to address issues which global public opinion desperately wants the Security Council to deal with. So the importance of the issue is beyond dispute, of course.
Please join me in a round of applause for our speakers.